If you think life under Julius Caesar was just about grand parades, conquering Gaul, and political genius, think again. The world he ruled was brutal, unpredictable, and downright dangerous, especially if you were anyone other than Caesar's closest allies or part of the elite Roman class. The Roman Republic was crumbling, and Caesar's rise to power marked the violent transition into what would become the Roman Empire. But survival was far from guaranteed. You had to navigate a world rife with political intrigue, civil war, betrayal, and constant violence. The first reason you wouldn't survive is because the concept of law and order was incredibly fragile during Caesar's time. The Republic's institutions were breaking down. The Senate, which once held real power, was reduced to a puppet body under Caesar's control. If you stepped out of line, or even appeared to oppose Caesar, the consequences were swift and brutal. Political enemies weren't just sidelined, they were eliminated. The infamous crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE wasn't just a military move. It was a declaration that Caesar would no longer tolerate the old rules. After that, anyone who opposed him was at risk of proscription, exile, or assassination. Your fate often depended less on justice and more on Caesar's whims and alliances. Beyond politics, everyday life for ordinary Romans was also harsh. Caesar's military campaigns meant that soldiers were constantly recruited, marched off to distant and deadly battles across Gaul and beyond, with little hope of return. The average legionary faced brutal conditions: starvation, exposure, diseases, and constant combat. If you were a common citizen, survival meant keeping clear of unrest and civil war, which was impossible. Rome itself was a powder keg. Street violence between rival factions and mobs backed by powerful politicians was frequent. Public order was tenuous. Caesar himself famously marched his armies into the city, a shocking breach of tradition, because the political chaos had spiraled out of control. If you lived in Rome during his reign, you needed to be either politically connected or extremely cautious, because violence could erupt anywhere, and mobs could turn deadly on a whim. One of the most dangerous aspects of Caesar's rule was the pervasive culture of betrayal and espionage. Trust was a rare commodity. Allies could turn on you overnight if the political winds shifted. Julius Caesar's rise to dictator for life created paranoia on all sides. Senators who once supported him became his enemies, and former enemies sought his favor. The infamous Ides of March, when Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, was the climax of this deadly game of trust and betrayal. You couldn't be sure if your closest friend or ally was plotting your downfall. Survival meant mastering the art of political deception and always watching your back, which few could do successfully for long. Socially, Rome under Caesar was also unforgiving. The vast disparity between the rich elite and the poor meant that most people struggled for basic survival. Slavery was widespread, and slaves had no rights or protections. Freedmen and poor citizens lived precarious lives. Caesar tried some reforms, like land redistribution and grain subsidies, to placate the masses. But these measures often made him enemies among the wealthy elite. If you were a senator or a wealthy landowner, you faced the threat of losing your power or life. If you were a poor citizen or slave, survival meant enduring exploitation, hunger, and violence. Public entertainment, like gladiator games and brutal. Public executions were a reminder of the state's control through fear and spectacle. Finally, the military culture under Caesar was a double-edged sword. His legions were among the most disciplined and effective fighting forces in history. But being a soldier was a dangerous life. Campaigns in Gaul lasted nearly a decade and were marked by fierce battles against tribes who resisted Roman conquest fiercely. Caesar's writings about his campaigns reveal the constant threat of ambush, starvation, and the harsh reality of ancient warfare. Even veterans faced the risk of falling out of favor or being used as pawns in Caesar's political games. Military success could elevate you, but one wrong move could see you branded a traitor or executed. Surviving the reign of Julius Caesar was like walking a razor's edge. You had to navigate a collapsing political system, a city on the brink of civil war, constant violence, betrayal, and social upheaval. Whether you were a soldier, a senator, a slave, or a common citizen, the odds were stacked against you. Caesar's Rome was a place where power was won and lost by blood, where loyalty was temporary, and where the ancient republic's ideals, gave way to ruthless ambition. If you weren't part of Caesar's inner circle, or exceptionally skilled at political survival, the chances of living through his reign unscathed were slim at best.